I was barefoot, standing in the kitchen, swirling the last of my wine when he knocked. The neighbor. I hesitated, hand hovering over the doorknob. My husband wasn't home. He was in Chicago for a 3-day conference, and we'd promised to check in every night at 10. But this was innocent, wasn't it? The neighbor had stopped by before, for dinner, for wine, for those soft, meandering conversations that filled the silence of our too-quiet house. He was kind, gentle, lonely. I opened the door anyway. He smiled, sheepish, holding up a bottle of red like it was a peace offering. Just thought you might want some company. I should have said no. I should have laughed it off, made an excuse about a bath or a book or an early morning. But I didn't. I stepped aside. You read my mind. One glass turned into another. And then another. The kitchen lights dimmed to amber. The air felt thicker, warmer. Our knees brushed under the counter. My laughter came easier, and his eyes stayed on me a little too long. I remember him telling me I looked different without my husband around. Lighter. Looser. Like I could breathe more fully. I remember how his words slid into the spaces wine had softened. When he reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, I didn't move. When his fingers grazed my cheek, I tilted toward him. And when he leaned in slowly like he was giving me time to change my mind, I didn't. My lips parted before his reached mine. It wasn't planned. It wasn't a decision. It was gravity. I had been waiting so long for something to make me feel again. And suddenly everything burned. His hand found my waist. My breath caught. And the moment stretched, twisted, deepened. There was no turning back. I didn't stop him. I didn't even want to. And when it was over, I thought he'd leave. That he'd look ashamed or scared or sorry. But he didn't. He stayed. And the next morning he brought me flowers. I didn't know what to say when I saw the flowers. They weren't anything extravagant. Just a small crinkled paper bouquet from the corner store, daisies, I think. The kind of flowers you bring when you don't want to say too much, but still want to be remembered, still want to matter. He handed them to me without a word, his eyes searching mine like he was waiting for a verdict, for a reaction, for regret. But I couldn't give him any of that. I stood there in my robe, hair still messy from the pillow, skin still tingling with the echoes of last night. I took the flowers. I thanked him. And he smiled, not that friendly, neighborly smile I was used to, but something slower, deeper. Like he knew a version of me my husband didn't. He stayed for coffee. We didn't talk about what had happened. Not directly. He just asked how I slept and I lied. Said fine. Even though my thoughts hadn't stopped racing since the moment his fingers slid down my spine and I forgot how to breathe. There was a silence between us, not awkward but full. Like something unsaid was floating in the room, curling around our ankles, daring either of us to name it. I didn't. And neither did he. After he left, I sat on the kitchen stool and stared at the empty mug he'd used, wondering how I got here. Wondering how a simple evening, one shared bottle of wine, had unraveled something in me I didn't even know was wound so tight. That night, when my husband called, I answered with a smile that didn't reach my chest. He told me about his meetings, his hotel room, how he missed me. I said all the right things, laughed in the right places. But all I could think about was how the neighbor's hand had lingered on my thigh when he got up from the table. How he'd looked back at me like he wasn't done. Like he'd be back. And he was. The next night. And the next. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. By the time he knocked again, I was already waiting by the door. By the third night, I stopped pretending it was spontaneous. I showered before he came. Took longer with my makeup. Chose a dress that felt a little too sheer for staying in. Soft cotton that clung in the right places and fell just above the knee. It was the kind of thing I used to wear for my husband when we were newly married, when everything still felt electric. Before routine softened all the edges. I didn't like candles, but I did open a second bottle of wine before he arrived. He didn't knock this time, just opened the back door like he belonged there. Like we'd crossed some invisible line and there was no going back. And honestly, there wasn't. He didn't kiss me right away. Instead, he watched me. Like I was something delicate and dangerous at the same time. His gaze traced me from across the kitchen, and I could feel it like heat under my skin. I couldn't breathe right when he looked at me like that. Couldn't think in straight lines. I wasn't sure if I should come, he said. You were already halfway here, I whispered. His jaw tensed like he wanted to say more, but instead he crossed the room slowly, so slowly, and stopped inches from me. The air between us felt electric, heavy with all the things we weren't supposed to feel. And then silence. Not a word. Just his fingers brushing my wrist as he took the glass from my hand. Just the sound of my breath catching in my throat. Just the beat of my heart thudding louder than it should. And when he leaned in, I didn't wait this time. I met him halfway, fingers fisting into his shirt like some part of me had been holding back for too long. The way he touched me wasn't careful anymore. It was confident, certain, like he'd memorized me overnight and had no intention of forgetting. I knew it was wrong, every part of it. But I also knew something else, something I hadn't admitted to myself yet. I wanted this. Not just the way he made my body come alive, but the way he looked at me. Like I wasn't just someone's wife. Like I was still desired. Still capable of drawing someone in, of shaking someone to the core. We didn't speak much after. Just lay in the quiet, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my hip. And when he finally left, he kissed my shoulder softly like a promise. The house felt different after that. Quieter. But not empty. Because I knew he'd be back again. And I knew I'd let him in. I stopped checking the clock when he came over. Time slipped differently with him, elastic, indulgent, reckless. What started as evening light across my kitchen tiles would fade into darkness without me even noticing. The bottle would be half empty. My legs would be draped over his lap. His fingertips would be tracing idle patterns against my skin, like he was reading something there I didn't even know I was writing. And I let him. Worse, I wanted him to. I told myself stories to keep the guilt from blooming too loud. That it was temporary. That I was lonely. That my husband had been distant anyway, more invested in his projects than in me lately. That maybe this was just a phase, some strange emotional detour. But the truth? I had stopped waiting for my husband a long time ago. I just hadn't realized it until someone else touched me like they actually saw me. There was a moment one night, maybe the 5th or 6th, I don't even remember anymore, where he looked at me like he was going to say something heavy. Something that would shift the shape of what we were doing. I held my breath. But he didn't say it. Instead, he kissed me. Not like a secret. Not like a mistake. He kissed me like I belonged to him. And the terrifying thing was, some part of me felt like I did. That night we didn't rush. We moved slowly, deliberately, like the whole world had narrowed to this single thread of breath and skin and unspeakable tension. Every touch was layered. Memory and desire and something almost tender underneath it all. It wasn't just lust anymore. It was something deeper. Something dangerous. After, he curled around me in the sheets and whispered my name like it meant something. Like he'd been holding it in his mouth for days. My heart thudded in response. Not with guilt but with craving. I wanted to hear him say it again. I wanted everything that I shouldn't want. And still, I hadn't told my husband. I couldn't. Because it wasn't just one mistake anymore. It was a pattern. A habit. A choice I was making night after night. With the door unlocked and the wine uncorked and the dress hanging just low enough to be deliberate. And the worst part? I wasn't sure I wanted to stop. The first time my husband called while the neighbor was still in the house, I almost didn't answer. My phone lit up on the kitchen counter, buzzing between the wine glasses. I froze. He looked at me from across the room, still half-buttoning his shirt, hair tousled, the flush of what we'd just done still fading from his skin. Neither of us said a word. I reached for the phone with fingers that trembled slightly, cleared my throat, smiled like nothing was wrong. Hey babe. His voice was cheerful, casual, telling me about some Italian place he found near the hotel, asking if I wanted to go when he got back. I murmured something. I think I said, "Sounds great." But the entire time I could feel the neighbor watching me. And worse, I liked it. That raw, dangerous thrill of speaking to my husband while another man stood a few feet away, while my body still remembered his touch. I hated that I liked it. I hung up quickly, told him I was tired. He said he missed me. I told him I missed him too. A lie so soft it barely made a sound. When I turned back around, the neighbor didn't speak. He just walked over slowly, reached for my hand and kissed my wrist. His lips were warm, gentle, like he knew he should leave but didn't want to. And I didn't ask him to. The guilt came in waves after that. Not constant but sharp, sudden. like stepping barefoot onto something jagged when you thought the ground was safe. I'd catch myself watching the door around 10, heart racing at the sound of every passing car. I started hiding the extra wine glasses, washing the sheets before my husband came home, locking the bathroom door even when I was alone, as if shame had taken physical form and might walk in uninvited. But the moment he knocked again, every ounce of guilt dissolved, because I kept craving the thing I wasn't supposed to have. The way he made me feel, uncontained, like desire could be a rebellion. And every time he left, he did it the same way. Slow kiss at the door, flowers in hand, that quiet promise in his eyes like he was waiting for the day I'd ask him to stay. Really stay. But I hadn't. Not yet. Because if I said it out loud, if I let it become real, I'd have to admit that I wasn't just betraying my husband. I was falling for someone else. Something shifted the day my husband came back. It wasn't obvious. No dramatic confrontation, no found shirt, no scent left on the pillow. I was careful. Too careful. The bed was made. The wine glasses were clean. The house smelled like lavender, not like him. But I was different. And my husband noticed. He kissed me hello like always, arms circling my waist, his suitcase thumping softly onto the floor behind him. I smiled, leaned in, played the part. But something in my body tensed just slightly, like my skin had grown used to a different kind of touch. His eyes lingered on me a beat too long. You okay? He asked, brow furrowing slightly. I nodded. Just tired. He didn't press. He never really did. That was the problem, wasn't it? He always assumed the best in me. Always trusted, always believed. And I had loved that about him once. But now it just made me feel unseen. That night, we curled into bed like usual, but something was missing. There was no hunger in the way he kissed my neck. No urgency. No fire. He loved me gently. Predictably. And as I lay there, eyes wide open in the dark, I felt nothing. No shame. No warmth. Just silence stretching between us. Deeper than any secret. The next morning he went for a run. And I sat at the kitchen table, robe pulled tight, staring at the same spot where the neighbor used to sit, shirtless, smiling, eyes teasing. The ghost of his presence filled the room, like he was still here. And when the doorbell rang, I knew before I even opened it. It was him. He hadn't texted, hadn't called, but somehow he knew. He looked surprised when he saw me. He's home. I nodded. My pulse thudded in my throat. He took a step back like he was ready to leave, to disappear again until the timing was easier, cleaner. But I stopped him. I stepped outside, barefoot on the porch, and closed the door behind me. We didn't touch. We didn't speak. We just stood there, face to face in the morning sun, both of us breathing a little too fast. And in that moment I knew something dangerous. He wasn't a mistake anymore. He was a choice I kept making. Even when it wasn't easy. Even when it meant risking everything. Days passed with my husband home. Each one stretched thinner than the last, like thread pulled too tight, threatening to snap. I smiled. I cooked. I laughed when I needed to. But inside something was unraveling. Because even while I lay beside the man I married, my thoughts kept drifting. To the one I didn't say no to. The one I couldn't stop wanting. The neighbor stopped coming by, but not in the way that made anything easier. He'd still appear. Across the street, watering his plants, shirt clinging to his back in the late summer heat. He'd glance toward my window just once, and then look away like he was punishing both of us. And still the tension lived under my skin. Tight. Unspoken. Waiting. One night after dinner, my husband sat across from me at the table and said, "You've been quiet lately." I stirred my glass, watching the ice melt. "Just tired," I said again. But he wasn't convinced this time. He reached across the table, took my hand. "Is something going on?" My chest tightened. My throat burned. For a second, just a second, I almost told him. Almost let it spill out, messy and aching, the way it had been living inside me for weeks. I imagined the look on his face. The way his fingers might pull away. The silence that would follow. But instead, I smiled. And shook my head. "No," I whispered. "Everything's fine." And that was the worst lie I'd ever told. Because later that night, when he fell asleep, breathing slow, arms wrapped around a version of me he thought was still his, I slipped out of bed. I padded downstairs in silence, heart pounding louder with every step. And I opened the back door. He was there. Like he knew. Like he'd been waiting all this time for the moment I'd choose him again. Not in the haze of wine, not in the heat of loneliness, but with eyes wide open. Neither of us said a word. He stepped in. And the second the door closed behind him, I melted into him. Desperate, hungry, silent. It wasn't soft this time. It was chaos. All the things I'd been holding back crashing into each other at once. His hands gripped my hips. My mouth found his neck. Every sound was muffled. Every heartbeat louder than the last. And as we sank to the floor, tangled, breathless, alive, I knew I had crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Not just in secret, but in feeling. Because what I felt wasn't guilt anymore. It was love. The next morning I stood in the kitchen again. Same robe, same coffee mug, same tired eyes. But everything had changed. He hadn't stayed the night this time. He'd left just before sunrise, quieter than usual, like he knew something in me had finally broken wide open. Like the game we were playing had ended. Not with drama or discovery, but with something more dangerous. Clarity. I loved him. Not in the way I loved my husband. Familiar, comfortable, woven through years of shared routines. No, this was different. Restless. Reckless. The kind of love that keeps you awake, even when your body begs for sleep. And I couldn't keep pretending. Not after last night. So I did something I never thought I would. I told the truth. It wasn't cinematic. There were no raised voices, no shattered glasses, no storming out the door. My husband sat across from me, stunned into silence, his coffee growing cold between his hands as I confessed, one piece at a time. I didn't use his name. I didn't need to. I just told him I had crossed a line. That it hadn't been once. That I hadn't stopped it. That I hadn't wanted to. He didn't ask why. He just looked at me for a long time like he was trying to find the version of me he thought he knew. Buried under this new woman who made choices he never saw coming. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. Do you love him? I didn't answer. Because saying yes felt like throwing a match on everything we'd built. And saying no would have been the cruelest lie of all. He left that afternoon. Quietly. No drama. Just a bag and a sigh and the soft click of the door behind him. And I sat there alone, still trembling from everything that had unraveled. Later, just before sunset, there was a knock at the back door. I didn't hesitate. I opened it. And when I saw him standing there, flowers in hand, eyes full of questions, I didn't speak. I just stepped into his arms. And for the first time, I let myself imagine a future that wasn't built on secrets. One that started not with safety but with fire. With wanting. With truth.